Let's move into the final part of the day. Everyone's got a side hustle, haven't they, these days? And my side hustle is I ghostwrite books for other people. And the current book I'm writing is a book about mental well-being, mental health in the workplace, called Breaking the Silence. And it's a book that talks about how we can remove the stigma of mental health in the workplace. And in part of the book, we use a phrase that has become something that I've thought about a great deal over the last year or two, which is that the brightest light often casts the darkest shadow, which I think is something that we could all remember. And it speaks to the fact that we don't often know who are the people who in our midst are the ones who are suffering the most and who feel the most anxious. So I just wanted to kick this panel session off with that thought, but I won't introduce this esteemed panel because they will do a much better job than I ever will of introducing themselves. So I'm going to start with you, Ruth, and maybe if we could work this way, and please, team, introduce yourselves before we get into the panel itself, which is really all about how you build well-being as a strategic imperative. How do you create well-being and build it into the very DNA of your business? And what are the tools and techniques that you can use to do that? So, Ruth, why don't you kick us off with a quick intro to yourself, which you didn't really do at the start of the day, but tell us about yourself very quickly.
So I'm Ruth Dance. I'm a mum to 3 boys under the age of 6, first and foremost, my most biggest accomplishment and my biggest role in life. I'm also the Chief Inspiration Officer at Inspiring Workplaces, and the lead singer of the band, it seems, today as well, but not without an incredible team around me. And my background is in learning and development, leadership development, coaching, employee engagement, and connecting the dots with customer experience too. So
fantastic. Well, Thank you for being a last-minute stand-in. I am hugely grateful.
I almost could have got away with looking like Christine, right?
Yeah, I think you
No
could.
one would have noticed.
No, indeed not. Duke, thank you for being here today. Please do introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. It's nice to be here. I appreciate all the information today. My name is Duke Daehling. I work for BetterUp. I've been in the HR space about 22 years, and my therapist said I'll be okay. I'm a father of 3. I'm a grandfather of 1. She's amazing, but not of 14 like my fellow here. And I'm just grateful to be here.
Thank you very much, Duke. Jack, please introduce yourself.
My name is Jack Wiley. Business-wise, I wear 3 hats. I am the Chief Scientific Officer for Engage to Excel, but I also have my own consulting firm, Jack Wiley Consulting, which engages in helping leadership teams with strategy, also conduct employee engagement surveys. And then my 3rd business hat is as the CEO of Employee Centricity, which is an IP company, and through which I published the book, Employee-Centric Manager. I do have 4 adult children. They have been very productive with their own children, 14 grandchildren. We're doing our best to repopulate the earth, and we have another one on the way.
Wow.
And I can also happily confirm that if ever you wanted to rent a dinner guest for the evening, you needed somebody to spruce up a dinner invitation. Jack was fantastic company last night. I had the pleasure of sitting next to him and opposite Duke, actually. So thank you, both of you, for last night. Thank you for coming, Mike. Please do introduce yourself.
Okay. What an honor to be on this stage with so many grandchildren, but also accomplishments and businesses and all of that. So I don't own any businesses, but I work for one. I'm Mike Lamm. I'm the Vice President of People for a company called Monday.com. If you haven't heard of it, Monday.com is a solution that truly democratizes the power of software. Many different use cases for our platform across CRM, HRM, many different ways that you can utilize it. But I'm leading all of our people functions here in North America, and just really excited to be here talking about a topic that is hugely important to not only myself but our organization and how we deliver, a great employee experience.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here. Right, we're going to kick off. It's late in the day. You've been an absolutely amazing group of people. You've been unbelievably engaged and engaging, and we are hugely grateful. So I'm going to have a little bit of fun in the first 5 minutes, so please forgive me for that. But it's fun with a purpose, okay? So, panel, I would like you, if you could, to imagine that I am 7 years old. And the reason I want you to imagine I'm 7 years old, because well-being is a word and a phrase that, frankly, is bandied around a lot. If you put it into Google, goodness knows how many million of entries you'll get. One person's well-being is another person's mental health, etc. So I want you to imagine I'm 7. And I would like you to explain to me, as if I was 7, what well-being is, please. Because I'd like to really get into a practical definition of how we define this thing so that we can then move on to perhaps the more serious elements of this debate and discussion. But well-being as a 7-year-old, Mike, why don't you kick off?
I can do that. So I don't have a 7-year-old, I have a 1-year-old. So I think about my own well-being a lot going through that right now. And I can also say anything I want to her because she doesn't understand what I'm saying. So, but if she were 7, or if I were to speak to you, I would really say, that well-being is about people like mommy and daddy going to the workplace and being as happy as they are when they're home, and just making sure that overall happiness is taking place.
Okay, I think that's a great definition. And I would definitely have understood that, age 7, I think. So that's a big tick. Jack, I know you said when we did our pre-rehearsal on this, I mentioned I was going to kick off with Jack and kick off with this question, and Jack said, "I'm not answering that, Gary." But I'm going to ask you to answer it because I know you spent a bit of time thinking about it. So talk to me as a 7-year-old. What's well-being?
Very good. So, of my 14 grandchildren, as a researcher, I would indicate that the median age is 7. And I can personify that with Cora, my granddaughter Cora. So if I were talking to Cora about well-being, I actually, as a researcher, would ask her questions. And I would ask her, are you happy today? Do you feel well? Does your tummy hurt? Does your head hurt? Do you get along well with your brother and sister? How are things going at school? Those are the kinds of questions I would ask, because I think well-being for a 7-year-old would be physical, psychological, relationship-oriented. Are things going well at school for them? Are they being bullied? That could be a part of well-being as well. So those are the kinds of questions I would ask as a researcher as it relates to a 7-year-old's well-being.
And an important stage forward, actually, in the workplace, I think, is the analogy is pretty obvious, I suspect. Duke, any thoughts on me as the 7-year-old?
Actually, the description of the way Jack unpacked that, I was trying to figure out the analogy. It's just like, when you've had a tummy ache? Yeah, how about a headache? How about runny nose? And try to create that understanding of the social, the physical, the cognitive, and emotional components of well-being as a whole individual. Even as a 7-year-old, they will be able to understand that there's more than just a tummy.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Now, Ruth, you are in a unique position, I suspect, to be able to answer this question. Your children, how would you answer that question to them?
So my eldest is 6, Theo. So much like Cora, when I pick him up from school, which I will do on Friday at 3 p.m., and every time I pick him up from school, I ask him, what was your favorite moment today? I used to ask him what was for lunch. It was like the most boring answer every day. So I've changed it up. What was your most favorite moment today? And he will tell me whatever his favorite moment was. Sometimes it's lunch. And I will say to him, and how did that make you feel? And for me, that's well-being. It's being at your absolute best and how you're feeling when you're at your best.
Great answer, great answer. I often start, when I'm interviewing people these days, I often start with one question, which is, where's your happy place? Where do you feel happiest in your life? Which is an amazing way of starting a conversation with people, actually. Okay, fun bit out of the way. I'm now going to project forward 17 years. I am now 24 years old, and I'm in the workplace. I'm in your workplace. I'm with you. You're leading me. What are the things that you do as leaders to look out for me? What do you do to make sure that you notice my well-being? What are the keys to making sure that you're building environments in which my well-being is prioritized? And as leaders and people engaged in this important topic, what are the things that you would be flagging, if you like, me as the 24-year-old member of your team? What are the things that you want to start to look out for? And Jack, maybe if I could start with you.
Sure. So I'm in the happy position of having asked that very question to 80,000 employees around the world, representing 27 different countries, and the results were fundamentally universal in answering the question of what do you want most from your immediate boss, and that's what I wrote the book about. But basically, the answers are as follows, that employees want from their bosses, first of all, they want to be supported and understood. Secondly, they want to be treated with dignity and respect. Thirdly, and these are primarily performance-related behaviors, they want you to communicate the performance expectations. In other words, define what success means. What is it you want me to do that represents a successful outcome? Then they also want to be recognized, psychological appreciation for a job well done, and they want to be rewarded for their performance contributions. In addition to that, they want to work for a boss who is skilled in problem solving and decision making, gets obstacles out of the way, processes decisions quickly, and by the way, makes good decisions. And then finally, there are two values that employees want in their bosses. One is that they be fair and just, and the second is that they be honest and trustworthy. So if you were to think about well-being and how you support a 24-year-old, you would want to make sure that you support them in their work. That is, you're available, you answer questions, you're supportive, you're a good listener, you're responsive, you follow through on their concerns. You treat them as a competent adult who's there to get the job done. You assume the best, good intent toward your employees, but you also are clear about what it is that you want from them in terms of their performance outcomes, and you make sure that they're fairly treated as it relates to compensation, but also training and development opportunities. You want to remove the obstacles to getting the job done for them, make good decisions that they may be waiting upon you to make, and by all means, the values have to be displayed. Values are, as was pointed out earlier, values are difficult to train, so we do a better job of pre-hire assessment on whether or not the values exist within those who are going to occupy supervisory and management positions. But you're always honest, you're transparent, you do what you say you're going to do. It's the old definition of integrity, do what you say you're going to do. That's the definition of being honest and trustworthy. So I think those are the things you'd have to attend to. And if you were to ask me why, well, let's think about why that's so important. There's a very valuable theory in psychology known as self-determination theory, which basically says that there are three important needs that adults have that must be satisfied in order for them to achieve psychological well-being. Number one, they have a need to be productive, to be competent at what they do in interacting with their environment. Number two, they have a need for belonging, that is relatedness. And number three, they have a need to operate independently, autonomously, if you will. Now, if a manager, let's just take the performance behaviors, communicates clear performance expectations, recognizes their contributions, and rewards them properly, all three of those behaviors enable, for example, my feeling of competence, because I'm going to know what it is I'm expected of me, I'm going to get positive reinforcement, and I'm going to get rewarded. Yeah. So these attributes that employees want in managers are important because they enable well-being, as an example. And if you're communicating clear performance expectations, you're probably giving your employee more opportunity to operate independently because they don't have to guess at what it is you want as an outcome.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Mike, me as the 24-year-old inside your organization, what are the things that you're doing, looking out for, helping?
I think one of the things that Jack said was about listening. And I think listening is a really important aspect of it. And one of the speakers right before we came on was talking about employee listening a little bit. And I think that's really important when it comes to well-being and ensuring that your managers and leaders have the skills to truly just be, as fundamental as it sounds, good listeners. One of the things that I've seen in this role and in other roles over the last 2 or 3 years is just what the evolution of well-being has been, and how we define it, and how it's changed, and how it regularly is changing. And I think that as leaders and as people who are leading people functions or responsible for rolling out these programs, it's a really important role that we have, is to listen and understand what's going on. What are our employees feeling? How do we continue to keep things fresh, make sure that our offerings, our programs, our initiatives aren't stale? And I think that if you're not doing that listening, you're going to become complacent with everything that you're already rolled out and you're delivering, and think that it's sort of hitting the mark. And if you're not building an environment or an ecosystem where there's good listening, good feedback, you're understanding what's hitting and what's not, then you most likely are missing the mark. And so I think that in coaching and talking to leaders and working with the 24-year-olds of which there are a lot at Monday.com, we listen a lot and we make changes a lot, and we ensure that it's a real living and breathing program. And whether it's offering new things, changing things up, ensuring that we're providing great training to everyone involved, we do that regularly. It keeps us on our toes. It makes working in this function really exciting because you're able to do new and exciting things on a regular basis, but it also makes our employees feel like they're being heard and their needs are being met. So I think it's really important.
Yeah, that listening piece, very important. I'm going to come back to that in a minute if I may. Ruth, thoughts on this?
When you're 24?
Yeah, when I'm 24, what are you looking out for? And
Gary, my answer's the same.
Yeah.
My answer's the same to my son Theo, who's 6, and the answer's the same to people who are 24 that work in my team. What was your favorite moment of today? But I'm going to listen probably a bit better than I do to my 6-year-old, because the answer's probably a bit more important. And how can I help you have more of those moments?
Yeah.
Whether that's around your physical well-being, financial well-being, spiritual well-being, emotional, mental, and all the other facets that sit under well-being. But what was your favorite moment, and how do I help you do that more? My answer's the same.
Brilliant. Fantastic answer, actually. Duke, last but definitely by no means least in this.
Making it to 24 years old is no joke. A 23-year-old died at Google in 2018, sitting at his desk on a Friday afternoon. Janitor found him on Sunday. That is not and I don't mean to, it could have been any company, right? It's not just Google. Google's the most successful company in history, right? They're amazing, but wow, that young man died. And when they did the root cause analysis, it's manager empathy could have solved that. Yeah. Listening, asking the right questions, really caring. And we dropped the ball, right? And he's not alone. Have you read the book? Jeffrey Pfeiffer wrote a book called Dying for a Paycheck. Whoa, devastating. This book, if you need somebody to be inspired about empathy as a manager, this one could crack the code.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing, very powerful reminder, by the way, that I think we all know in this room, and I think if you look at the data that companies like Gallup are putting out, and have been tracking for a long time, I think we all know that there is another pandemic coming. And that pandemic is in the area of mental health, and it's in the area of well-being. I think we all know it. The data says so. I think the environment we all live in and experience tells us that. And I think, therefore, the reason we wanted Ruth and I to really end with this topic is, if you like, a sober reminder of its importance, but a real kind of sense of what can we all do in this room to make sure that we never, to the very best of our abilities, have to be that janitor on the Sunday at Google, because I think that's in the end where sometimes these things end up, as we know, and it's a powerful reminder, I think. And I was just struck just thinking about the listening piece, panel, that as it pertains to, say, hybrid working, I was very struck at the start of the pandemic and as we emerged from the end of the pandemic that people who talked a lot about where people wanted to work, right? Now, it always struck me that was the wrong question, because the real question is, why do they want to work where they want to work? And in a way, the answer to that question was so different, depending on whether you were a 23-year-old living in a flat with 4 other 23-year-olds, or whether you were actually living out in the country with, frankly, a nice garden to sit in. And so the why you want to work where you want to work seems to me to be at the heart of how we can help well-being in this post-pandemic phase. Really listening to our people about why they want to do those things is way more important than the discussion about where they want to work. I think, in my opinion, would just be a personal observation, I think. Great, thank you very much for that. I want to move on now just very quickly to really starting to think about how you bake it in to the very DNA of your company. What do you do to make it the strategic imperative? What do you do to make it the only thing that frankly becomes the definer of how you start to build businesses? Clearly, it shouldn't be the only definer, but I'm using that I'm exaggerating to make a point now. Put yourself, if you can, in the role of where you are today, which is leaders in your field and people who are running businesses. You've got a major influence, I think, on the businesses that you're in, and ultimately, I suspect, will one day be leading huge organizations. What do you do? What is the real answer to this question about how to make well-being a strategic imperative? There'll be people in this audience who are leading, want to lead, will one day emerge as amazing leaders if they're not already. What's the answer to that, Duke? And where do you think that discussion starts?
It starts with understanding the criticality of it. Every individual that's surveyed on this, and we've got data, not as many as Jack, but we have data that says about 65% of people say that well-being is either an impediment or an accelerator to their personal performance. People want to do well, as you indicated, and it's personal. Why am I here? What filled me up today? What filled me up this week? Why am I? What's my purpose? In your 4-bucket model that you talked about this morning, the 4th circle of what does the world really need and how do I fulfill that? Why am I getting up every day? That's a personal thing. And if you can increase self-awareness at the individual level, situational awareness of where they're actually in their context, and then mirror that with their colleagues, the people around them, that feeling of belonging and connectivity, as well as their manager's awareness of where they are to create a situation that is meaningful to them at the individual level. These sheep dip programs that are large-scale change programs or learning programs or communication programs are grossly ineffective. The transformation rates are massive failures if you look at the real data. And so creating that personalized approach at the one-on-one level, I think, is the true way to get there.
Thank you very much. Mike, your thoughts on this kind of, strategic question, if you like, about top-down, how do you make it an imperative?
I think that it's really important to connect what you're doing to your values as an organization, too. One of the things at Monday, a key value that we have is around flexibility, and I've already spoken to it a little bit, but in a different way. Our platform, for example, our product, it's very flexible. It can be used in many different ways. The way that you work as an employee at Monday, it's very flexible. And also in the way that we focus on well-being and the benefits that we offer and things like that, extremely flexible. One example is around mental health and the way that we provide support to our employees. Giving them many different offerings for how they can support their own mental health, whether it's through different apps that they're able to get discounts on that we've negotiated, or, for example, we give them a certain amount of wellness coaching sessions that they're able to take advantage of whenever they want on a flexible schedule, however they want to utilize them. Again, that's us in the same way from a work schedule or where you're working from. We just want you to get your job done, and we're flexible in the way that we go about that. But in the same way, we want you to be your best self when you come to work, and you have the flexibility to utilize many of these different offerings whenever you'd like. So that's very key to us. We want to make sure that we are as I've mentioned before, keeping things fresh, flexible, and utilizing them in the way that our employees want to. And I think that that's really key, and that's how we connect it to our values as an organization, and we're able to talk about it at a more strategic level throughout the org.
Yeah. And Ruth, I'm going to embarrass you for a minute, if I may, and say you're already demonstrating actually how you build it as a strategic imperative by doing a brilliant job of putting together days like today, frankly. And I'm going to say this at the end, but hard to underestimate how hard Ruth has worked and the team to build this day and put these people together. And I think you're already demonstrating how you do it, right? How you do it is you bring people together like this, and you, I think, force people to really think about these issues in a way that means we can all connect around them and talk about them and acknowledge them. But beyond the work you're already doing, which is obviously, in my opinion, magnificent, what else would you say in terms of thinking about that question?
I think you don't do it. I think it's already happening. You don't make it an imperative, it's already an imperative. It's already critical right now. And I don't think you do it. I think we just bring the stories out, the suicides, the deaths, and the sparkle moments that my son's having at school. Yeah. But we story tell. Stories matter, right?
Indeed,
we story tell, we share, and we're all accountable at every level. It doesn't sit. I think there's too much of sitting in HR and HR's responsibility or leaders' responsibility. You don't do it, it's already happening. We've just got to bring it out of people. Create the right environment for those seeds, like David said this morning.
Yeah. I've suddenly realised we committed a major strategic error by not inviting you on this panel in the first place, by the way. You should have been number one on the list, as far as I can work out, based on the last 25 minutes. But to be fair, fantastically, relevant but straightforward and brilliant answers, I think. Jack, your thoughts on this area?
Well, I would agree with the things that have been put forward. I think it's also important that we realize that there are, as I'm sure we do, a number of influencers of well-being. It certainly has to do with strategic decisions that top management might make with regard to the policies that are going to put into place, for example, with regard to work-life balance and flexible work and those kinds of things. But actually, there's a whole domain of researchers who focus on the physical aspect of the workplace and how that contributes to the well-being of employees as well. And then when you ask employees, what is the single biggest contributor to dissatisfaction at work, they typically say their relationship with their immediate boss. And so if we were to help inform managers about how they can be better in their interactions with their subordinate employees, that would go a long way toward increasing well-being. I mean, after all, if you think about how would you measure a manager's performance? I mean, at the end of the day, we would think about a good manager being one who creates a great experience for their employees, who has high employee engagement index scores, whose team is internally cohesive, and a reduction or absence of dysfunction, and at the end of the day, high performing. And in the research that I've conducted, managers who actually are responsive to what employees most want are the ones who are hitting it out of the park on all of those aspects. Their work experience scores are terrific. Their employee engagement index scores are almost through the roof. They have internally cohesive teams, and they're performing at exceptional levels. So part of it has to do with helping managers understand how they need to be different or better in terms of creating that great experience for employees where they can achieve that well-being that they seek and that they want in their lives.
Yeah, fascinating and brilliantly articulated, actually. Thank you for that. I've got one more question to ask of you towards the end, but I want to, if I can, just to throw it out to the people in the room. We've obviously got 4 people here who've got immense experience, and so I'd like to hear from people, ask questions. So maybe if we start there and go there, that would be great. And I'll keep looking around the room this side, because I'm conscious I've got my back to you most of the time, so I'm really sorry. But yes.
First of all, thank you. This has been amazing. I have about 1 million questions, but I'm going to ask one. So everything that you have talked about, what if the system in which the leader, the employee is working, does not support what you're saying? As an example, compensating or rewarding an employee properly for the work that they're doing. What if your span of control is such that you cannot make change at the organizational level? How do you prioritize and lead a team with well-being in mind when the system is actively working against it?
That is a fantastic question, I think. And Duke, I'm going to turn to you first, which I know is probably hard, actually, but maybe I'll do a quick filler and just talk. But no, I'm going to turn to you.
No, I'll buy enough time so that the smart folks can kick in. There's a lot that's in your span of control. I think it's actually an underestimation about what you can do as an individual to manage your own well-being, as well as within your system or your manager or your team departments in which you exist. Yes, there are limiting factors that are stifling, like institutional racism or incredible barriers to entry for women, or there's 1,000 ors. There are nuggets, though. There are pockets where you can create some magic, and it's not a way to institutionalize it or create structures or systems. As you said, it is an uphill battle, but you can find pockets of greatness, and then it's celebrate it, identify it, create the opportunity for that story to be told, how they are separating themselves from a performance or retention or diversity standpoint to really create that exemplar and turn some heads. It wasn't, I work with Boeing. I mean, I mostly work with our government and public sector institutions and military, but I also work with Boeing, and when their CEO, Dave Calhoun, stood up and said, we're going to end racism. Like, whoa, that's a great, I mean, and I think a person that spoke earlier today said anti-racism committee. I was like, well, those are two things that are really funnily different. Like, committees have a connotation of being really ineffective, and anti-racism needs to be effective. How can we remove the committee part of that, of the equation? And so having that leadership to support it, even if there's a groundswell of barriers, can also be the other way, where the system wants to change it, but the bottom of the org won't. So there's always going to be resistance. We just got to fight.
Mike, thank you, Duke. Mike, any thoughts on that? Any additional comments?
Tough question. I think as broad of a definition as you can create around well-being, which there are many, it enables you to sort of attack or address well-being in many different ways. If you're it sounds like you were talking about total rewards, compensation, elements like that. While you're fighting the fight and you're trying to make changes there, having a more broad definition around how you're addressing well-being for your employees enables you to continue to invest in their well-being in many different ways. And there's even ways of thinking about well-being around what you were talking about with like anti-racism and ending racism around like purpose-driven well-being. So how are we enabling employees to bring their best selves to work from a philanthropic perspective? And how are we filling their tank in the areas that aren't always related to compensation, total rewards, benefits, but there's mental health, there's physical health, there's purpose-driven elements to it. You have different pillars, you could say, to how you address these things that you're able to lean into while you work on improving the areas where maybe you're finding issues. And I think that if you're so focused on the areas where maybe you're not able to use that as a lever for well-being, and you're focused on just driving that, and you're forgetting all the other ways that you're able to take care of your employees, you're going to lose them. And so I think that you should be fighting the good fight and trying to change the systemic things that need to be addressed in your organization, especially related to total rewards. But while you're doing that, if you have a broad enough definition, you can keep pushing and making sure that you're taking care of your employees, like I said, in ways that maybe we haven't even thought of. And the purpose-driven element, which is something that we drive a lot at Monday, was because of employee listening. Our employees were very passionate about NGOs and working with nonprofits and being able to be community organizers. That filled their tank. And we've been working on other elements along the way to make sure that our entire portfolio of well-being is optimized. And I think that that's what we have done, and we've seen success.
Thank you. I'm going to move on just so we can get some, enough questions in. I think you had a question.
I think it's on. So my question is, how do you balance employee engagement at the risk of growing entitlement in your organization?
And how do you balance?
Employee entitlement, yes.
Yeah. And
Entitlement.
yeah, it's a good question. Jack, if I may, I'm going to turn
What
to
was
you.
the last part of the question?
Engagement versus entitlement.
Entitlement.
How do you get the balance?
How do you balance those two twin pillars?
Well, when we
So I'll
think
give you an example. So I work in I lead a call center environment and have for a very long time. There's never enough you can do for your employees. So the question becomes, at what point does that become entitlement? When you're trying to promote engagement?
A call center is one of those roles where 100% of your employees don't really want this to be their job. Like, that's just like, that's a hard spot.
Some do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When engagement has some different definitions depending upon where you're coming from, and we've seen a whole host of definitions over the course of the last 20 years, but I've studied engagement intensively, and what I've found is that there's really 4 key drivers of engagement. Number one, do people have trust and confidence in their senior leaders? Or in other words, are we on a winning course, and are we progressing against that winning course? Number two, the immediate manager. Do they recognize the contributions of individual employees, and so that there's a sense of psychological appreciation? Number three, and this perhaps is a limit in the setting you're talking about, but have we matched the skills and interests of the employee to the job itself? Because if we're not jazzed up about the job, then it's hard to be overly engaged at the work that we do. And then number four, is there an opportunity for growth and development, which in your case might be tied to the third issue as well, but employees really want to see an opportunity for them to learn new skills, become better equipped for the next job, have a manager who's going to help them point out potential career paths and where you can move from here. So those are really the pillars of creating a more engaged workforce in terms of how I've studied it, and I've looked at that for many years. But that would be my answer. Those are the levers to pull in terms of trying to create a more engaged workforce. And I would move it away from a sense of entitlement. No, we do this so that we can have an engaged workforce, because we know scientifically that an engaged workforce actually contributes to organizational performance. So it's no longer just a matter of engagement is correlated to performance. It's actually, no, we've moved beyond that. Our research designs have allowed us to establish that engagement is a cause of organizational performance. And from the world of science, that's actually a pretty substantial step in our progress of understanding engagement.
Yeah.
Can I speak to that?
Please do, Mike. Yeah.
I think because, and in my organization, we deal with this a lot, not necessarily just from a customer operations or a call center perspective, but just overall. There's a lot of requests for more, and we think that in order to ensure that all of our employees are engaged, we address their needs. We say, okay, you want to do this, you want to add this program, you want to do something different, let's do it. And we think that that's going to keep them engaged. But what it does form is, in some ways, it could create a sense of entitlement, right? Where I need this in order to be happy, so this is what I expect. And I think that oftentimes that's the mistake, is that we are in the driver's seat, or that from a leadership perspective, you're in the driver's seat of delivering the programs that are in place. And so sometimes we flip the script and we put them in the driver's seat, and we create culture groups within our organizations to say, well, we want you to be engaged, we want to make sure that this is an amazing place to work, so tell us how to do that. And also, we're going to enable you to do that, and give them the systems and the processes and the tools in order to do some of those things themselves. And that sort of addresses some of the issues on our end, because it enables them to feel enabled, empowered, to make some of those decisions on their own. And there's less of us playing the role of you're able to do this thing, you're not able to do that, and fielding requests in a way. So putting the power in their hands, creating culture committees, things like that within the organization, it has enabled us to address that in a way.
Mike, thank you. Let's move on. We've probably got time for one more question. I'm going to take one from this side of the room, if that's okay. There's a mic running its way, making its way over.
Thank you. So going back to the pillars we were talking about before, the financial, emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical, from a well-being perspective, how are you seeing other employers invest in their employees from a total rewards and benefits standpoint?
Okay, so I brought that up, I guess, so I'll start with this one. I've had the honor over the last 7 years of reading award entries from probably thousands of organizations across the globe now. The organizations that are really making well-being a strategic imperative are doing two things. One, exactly what Mike just said. In fact, I led a call center at News Corp for a while, so hats off to you for doing it longer than a year. I didn't make it longer than a year, it's hard. But empowerment, empowering people to make their own decisions around well-being and giving them the autonomy and the decision to make that. In fact, the word empowerment is a Latin word. It means to hand the power over. So empowering people to make those decisions. Now, in terms of those pillars, and what are organizations doing really well? They're doing more than just financial education, mental health education, community education, physical education. They're doing more than running clubs and a week off, an extra week off. They're doing more than that. They are truly putting the person at the very, very first priority. And I mean it. Like, they're not just saying, oh, you know what, people are really important, so we put you first. But they're still keeping an eye on the profit line. There's an organization in the UK, it's an accounting and tax company. And the CEO says, this is the CEO of a very, very successful accountancy firm, who says, I really don't even look at the numbers. Can you believe this? A CEO of a tax company just does, and I believe him. Like, he doesn't even look at the numbers. I just want to know how my people are every single day. And this is from, like, yeah, they have unlimited annual leave, and yeah, their dress code is wear something. Like, that their office environments is absolutely reasons over rules. But in terms of those pillars around well-being, they just really just listen to their people, just truly just listen to every single person as an individual and help to create the environments where people can absolutely thrive. But there's 1,000,001 examples and case studies about to go live on our website from all of the awards this year, so you can filter by well-being, which would probably be really helpful. I'm conscious of time, otherwise I could give you many more.
Ruth, thank you very much. Duke, any thoughts?
The investments that people are making, I find that I'm seeing less and less EAP investments, where that's decreasing, and more bespoke by segment, whether they're early career professionals, different demographics, different geographies, that gets into a more bespoke approach to offering wellness solutions. And it's not just unlimited days off and dogs in the office and ping pong and whatever. It's not that. It's really looking after, how's your head? How's your heart? Are you doing okay? Physical burnout, mental burnout.
Thank you. Jack, thoughts on that question?
I don't think I can add anything to what
to
what already has been said.
Yeah, okay.
Well covered.
Mike, any? No, good.
Good.
Okay. Thank you, I'm so sorry. I know there was a couple of questions. I think the four of us are going to be around at least for another 15, half an hour, before we have a drink and
3 hours.
3 hours maybe, yeah. And so I just wanted to say, I'm going to end with one question really, and it's a quick fire round really. But when we're talking about this issue of well-being, if you had one piece of advice to your boss, to your CEO, what would it be to make sure that well-being is put first, foremost, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh? What would it be? One advice. It can be one word. It can be one line. What would it be, Ruth?
I want my CEO to be completely, authentically vulnerable, I'll stop.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Duke.
The messy middle. Focus on the messy middle. There's the top 5% that are thriving, bottom 5% that are disastrously languishing, and they need CBT. But this messy middle is where the real truth is.
Thank you. Jack?
When I asked employees around the world, what is the most important thing you want from your immediate boss, 26% said that the most important thing was to be supported and to be understood. And that was twice as large as the next attribute in that rank order. So my advice would be to be accessible, be supportive, listen, address employee concerns, and when if you can solve the support and understanding attribute, you've gone a long way toward winning the hearts and minds of employees.
Thank you very much, Mike. Just to close us out.
You said one word.
It could be one sentence,
I'll
one
say
word.
2 words.
Yeah, 2 words.
I didn't hear that part.
It doesn't. No, exactly.
Keeping track.
Yeah, exactly.
I've said it the entire time I've been up here. Listen and be flexible.
Okay, good words to finish with. I just wanted to say 2 thank yous. One is to my business partner, who you know very well, Michael, who actually was instrumental in putting this panel together. And to be honest, what a panel it's been, actually. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor, actually, to sit and listen to all of you, or stand and listen to all of you talk about this issue. And so a big thank you to my business partner, Michael, who's done that. But an even bigger thank you on behalf of everybody here, I hope, to Ruth, to Duke, to Jack, and to Mike for ending our conference, ending our summit with what I hope has been an interesting, enjoyable, insightful, and sometimes profound examination of this issue. So thank you very much indeed, Tim.
Thank you.